Did you know that Australia has its own Bigfoot and the evidence is overwhelming? From ancient rock art and Aboriginal lore to modern-day sightings, including video footage and thermal visuals, the Yowie is far more real than most people realize. For many centuries, reports of a mysterious, large, bipedal creature have emerged from the remote forests of Australia. Known as the Yowie, this cryptid is often described as Australia's version of Bigfoot, exhibiting many of the same characteristics attributed to North American Sasquatch and the Himalayan Yeti. Though dismissed by mainstream science, the sheer number of reports, combined with historical documentation, footprint evidence, and modern video footage, builds a compelling case for the Yowie's existence. History of the Yowie in Indigenous Australian lore. For thousands of years, Indigenous Australians have passed down stories of the Yowie, a powerful, hairy, human-like being believed to inhabit the vast, untamed wilderness of Australia. These oral traditions, which predate European settlement by millennia, provide some of the most intriguing evidence that an undiscovered hominid species has long existed in the Australian wild. Unlike modern cryptid sightings, Indigenous descriptions of the Yowie are deeply rooted in cultural beliefs, often treating the creature as both a physical being and a spiritual entity. Ancient lore and traditional knowledge. Many Aboriginal tribes have different names for the Yowie, though each version remains remarkably consistent in description. In New South Wales, it is known as the Dooligal, while tribes in Queensland refer to it as the Jimbra or Changara. The Kuku-Yalanji people of the far north have long spoken of the Quinkin, a race of large, hairy beings that lived in the deep rainforest. These beings were often divided into two types, one benevolent and another aggressive, a distinction mirrored in other Indigenous accounts of the Yowie as well as Sasquatch. Elder Gubu Ted Thomas, a respected Yuin Nation elder, once stated, quote, "The Dooligal was real to our people. The old fellas used to talk about them, warn the young ones not to go too deep into the bush where they lived." His testimony aligns with numerous Aboriginal legends that describe the Yowie as a territorial creature that avoided human settlements but occasionally interacted with people. The late Canberra elder, Harry Williams, recalled seeing a group of Aborigines kill what he called a hairy man when he was a child of about 12, around the year 1849. He reported that the incident took place near the junction of the Yass and Murrumbidgee rivers. He recalled, quote, "The animal got into some cliffs of rock and the men got torches to find out where it was hidden. Then they killed it with their nulla nullas, an Australian club or hunting stick. There were a great many men at the killing, and I saw two dragging the creature down the hill by its legs. It was like a huge black man, but covered in gray hair." Carvings, rock art, and petroglyphs. Beyond oral traditions, ancient Aboriginal rock art provides further evidence of an awareness of the Yowie-like beings. Some of the oldest petroglyphs in Australia depict large, upright creatures with exaggerated facial features and elongated limbs, markedly different from the known fauna of the time. In the Wollemi National Park region of New South Wales, cave paintings dated at over 5,000 years old show figures with broad shoulders, long arms, and what appear to be thick coats of hair. Aboriginal elders believe these images depict the Dooligal or other Yowie-like creatures encountered by their ancestors. Indigenous encounters with the Yowie. While many Yowie stories are passed down as myths, some modern encounters by Aboriginal Australians mirror those recorded by early European settlers and contemporary witnesses. In 1875, Aboriginal trackers working with colonial explorers near Kilcoy, Queensland, warned their employers of a, quote, "hairy man inhabiting the area." The explorers later reported seeing a large bipedal figure near their camp, an event consistent with the Indigenous warnings. In a more recent account, Aboriginal elder Harry Anderson recounted a terrifying experience from his childhood in the Blue Mountains. Quote, "We were out hunting, and we saw it, watching us. It was massive, standing on two legs, covered in hair. The old men told us to leave it be. that it was an old spirit of the land. His description aligns closely with many non-Indigenous reports of Yowie encounters from the same region. Historical European Yowie sightings. As European settlers began exploring and colonizing Australia in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, they encountered many strange phenomena in the vast and largely uncharted wilderness. Among the most intriguing were sightings of a large, bipedal, hair-covered creature that bore a striking resemblance to accounts passed down by Indigenous Australians for millennia. These early European reports of the Yowie, often referred to as wild men or hairy men, provide a significant historical foundation for the belief that an undiscovered hominid has long existed in the remote regions of Australia. Early colonial accounts. One of the first widely reported European encounters with a Yowie occurred in 1842 when a group of settlers near what is now Sydney described seeing a towering ape-like figure covered in dark hair. The creature reportedly moved with a swift, deliberate gait, far larger than any known native animal. The report, published in early colonial newspapers, sparked curiosity, but was largely dismissed as an exaggeration. By the 1870s, as more settlers moved into the dense bushland of New South Wales and Queensland, reports of the Yowie increased. One of the most famous early accounts came from Henry James McCooey, a naturalist who claimed to have encountered a Yowie near Bateman's Bay in 1876. McCooey wrote a letter to the Australian Town and Country Journal, describing the creature as, quote, between 5 and 6 feet high, distinctly human-shaped but covered in long, thick hair. He insisted that the being was neither a gorilla nor an orangutan, but a species unknown to science. His account remains one of the earliest documented cases of a European settler describing a Yowie with anatomical precision. In 1882, a report emerged from the Blue Mountains, detailing an encounter with a, quote, wild man, seen by several witnesses near Mount York. The report, published in the Sydney Morning Herald, described a large, hairy figure that fled upon being spotted. Several attempts were made to track the creature, but it disappeared into the dense bushland. Another report from the same period described a Yowie harassing workers at a remote logging camp, leading to speculation that these creatures actively avoided human contact, but were capable of defending their territory when necessary. 20th century Yowie encounters. As Australia moved into the 20th century, sightings of the Yowie persisted, though they became more sporadic due to increased development and deforestation. However, some notable encounters occurred during this period that added to the mystery surrounding the creature. In 1912, a prospector named Charles Harper encountered what he described as a, quote, gorilla-like beast in the forests near Mount Kosciuszko. According to Harper, the creature stood over 7 feet tall and was covered in thick, matted fur. He reported that it let out a deep, guttural growl before retreating into the undergrowth. Harper, familiar with Australia's native wildlife, was adamant that it was not a known animal. Another significant case occurred in 1936, when a group of soldiers training in the dense jungles of North Queensland reported encountering a large bipedal figure watching them from the tree line. Some of the soldiers fired warning shots, but the creature retreated into the forest. The soldiers, many of whom had extensive bush experience, ruled out the possibility of it being a misidentified human or animal. By the 1970s, modern-day researchers, such as Rex Gilroy, began compiling historical Yowie reports, preserving these early encounters in written form. Gilroy spent decades gathering thousands of testimonies from settlers, prospectors, and bushmen, many of whom described encounters eerily similar to those reported in the 19th century. In his book, Mysterious Australia, Gilroy stated, quote, the consistency in reports across generations suggests that these creatures are not figments of imagination, but rather an undiscovered species that has managed to elude scientific classification. Gilroy suggested that the Yowie could be an offshoot of an ancient primate species related to Gigantopithecus, an extinct giant ape that once roamed Asia. His documentation of Australian hominid sightings remains one of the most comprehensive to date. One of the most well-documented Yowie encounters occurred in 1971 when a group of school children in Springbrook, Queensland, reported being chased by a towering, hair-covered creature. Several of the children, along with adults in the area, described the same bipedal figure and noted its deep, guttural vocalizations. In 1997, a government worker named Peter Luce had a frightening encounter near Kilcoy, Queensland. While driving late at night, he spotted a massive, upright figure standing near the side of the road. He described the creature as, quote, over 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered, and covered in reddish-brown hair. His account gained credibility due to his detailed descriptions of its facial features, which he claimed bore both human and primate-like characteristics. The 21st century has seen a surge of Yowie reports, thanks in part to the widespread use of smartphones and dash cams. Many eyewitnesses have captured brief but intriguing footage of what appears to be an unknown upright hominid moving through the Australian bush. Yowie footage and photographic evidence. Several video recordings have surfaced that purport to show the Yowie in motion. While some have been dismissed as inconclusive, others have attracted serious attention from both cryptid researchers and primatologists. Steve Piper Yowie footage, 2000. One of the most compelling pieces of video evidence was captured by Steve Piper in 2000. The footage, taken in the Australian wilderness, shows a dark, upright figure moving between trees. Piper, a seasoned bushman, claimed he was alone at the time and had no reason to fake the sighting. Upon analysis, the figure's proportions and movement do not match those of a human. The footage remains one of the most studied Yowie videos to date. Springbrook National Park thermal footage, 2019. Captured by Yowie researcher Dean Harrison and his team using thermal imaging cameras, this footage from Springbrook National Park, Queensland, shows 2 large bipedal figures moving through dense forest at night. Thermal analysis indicates that the figures give off heat signatures inconsistent with known animals. Fellow Yowie researcher Rex Gilroy called this, quote, the most compelling thermal evidence of Yowies to date. Harrison founded Australian Yowie Research, or AYR, an organization dedicated to documenting and analyzing Yowie encounters. Harrison himself has had multiple encounters with Yowies and has collected an extensive database of eyewitness testimonies, making him one of the most authoritative figures on the subject. Yowie footprint evidence. Like its North American counterpart, the Yowie has left behind large, well-defined footprints, some of which have been cast in plaster for study. Springbrook track casts, 1990s to the present. Multiple plaster casts taken from Springbrook National Park in Queensland show footprints measuring up to 17 inches long, with dermal ridges and toe splay patterns matching that of a large primate. Dr. Jeff Meldrum, an anthropologist specializing in primate locomotion, analyzed these casts and stated that, quote, the pressure ridges and toe flexion indicate a living foot, not an artificial imprint. Kilcoy Yowie footprint, 1979. One of the most famous Yowie track discoveries occurred near Kilcoy, Queensland in 1979. The print measured over 16 inches long and had a deeply pressed heel, indicating significant weight. Researchers concluded that the print was not fabricated due to the depth and toe curvature, which aligned with natural foot mechanics rather than static wooden cutouts. Addressing skeptical claims against the existence of the Yowie. The existence of the Yowie, Australia's elusive bipedal hominid, has long been the subject of skepticism. Critics argue that Yowie sightings are the result of hoaxes, misidentifications, or cultural myths, rather than evidence of an unknown species. However, these skeptical claims often fail under closer scrutiny. When we examine the consistency of eyewitness reports, the supporting physical evidence, and the limitations of alternative explanations, the case for the Yowie becomes far stronger than the skeptics are comfortable acknowledging. Claim: Yowie sightings are misidentified native animals. One of the most common skeptical explanations is that Yowie sightings are simply misidentified kangaroos, wallabies, or large feral animals. While it is true that Australia has unique wildlife, this argument collapses when considering the specifics of many encounters. Yowie reports frequently describe a large, muscular, bipedal figure standing well over 6 feet tall, covered in thick hair, with long arms and a pronounced gait that does not match any known Australian animal. Kangaroos, for instance, have a distinctively different posture and mode of locomotion, hopping rather than striding, with an articulated knee bend, like a primate. Furthermore, many reports describe clear facial features, deep-set eyes, and expressions of intelligence, attributes not associated with any marsupial. In the 1876 Bateman's Bay encounter, naturalist Henry James McCooey explicitly stated, quote, "It was neither a gorilla nor an orangutan, but a creature unknown to science." This statement suggests that even trained observers were unable to link Yowie encounters to any known species. Claim: Yowie reports are the result of hoaxes. Skeptics often cite hoaxes as a primary reason for dismissing Yowie reports. While it is undeniable that some cases have been fabricated, just as in the Bigfoot phenomenon in North America, this does not account for the sheer volume of credible encounters documented over centuries. Hoaxes are usually exposed through inconsistencies in testimony or lack of supporting evidence. However, many Yowie reports are accompanied by detailed descriptions, footprint casts, and even video footage that suggest genuine experiences rather than fabrications. Notably, many reported encounters come from experienced bushmen, military personnel, and park rangers, individuals trained in wildlife identification and unlikely to be fooled by a hoax. The 1936 encounter by soldiers in North Queensland, in which a large bipedal creature was seen watching their unit from the jungle, stands out as particularly credible. These were trained observers operating in a remote region with no incentive to fabricate such an event. Claim: the Yowie is a cultural myth with no scientific basis. Another common argument is that the Yowie is simply a folklore construct with no biological reality. Skeptics argue that Indigenous Australian stories of the Doolittle or Quinkin were spiritual or symbolic rather than descriptions of a real creature. However, this claim disregards the striking consistency between Aboriginal oral histories and modern European encounters. Indigenous Australians across vastly different regions have described large, hairy, bipedal creatures long before European arrival. These beings were not seen as mythical spirits, but physically present entities that were feared, avoided, and respected. Claim: there is no physical evidence to support the Yowie's existence. One of the strongest skeptical arguments is the lack of a captured specimen or widely accepted physical remains. While this is a valid concern, it does not negate the presence of footprint evidence, video footage, and forensic analysis of track casts. Multiple Yowie footprint casts have been examined by experts like Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who concluded that some specimens exhibit dermal ridges, mid-tarsal breaks, and pressure ridges, consistent with a living primate's foot structure. Additionally, finding Yowie remains in Australia is exceedingly unlikely due to the rapid decomposition of organic matter in the harsh environment and the sheer vastness of the country's wilderness. With 741 million acres of remote, often inaccessible terrain, ranging from dense rainforests to arid outback, any remains would be quickly scavenged by dingoes, feral pigs, insects, and microbial activity. Even known animals like kangaroos and dingoes, which exist in the millions, rarely leave behind intact skeletons. In such an immense and self-recycling ecosystem, the odds of stumbling upon the remains of a highly elusive, intelligent creature like the Yowie are astronomically low. Conclusion: the case for the Yowie. Despite skepticism, the extensive historical and modern reports of the Yowie, combined with footprint evidence and compelling video footage, present a strong case for its existence. The consistency of Indigenous lore, coupled with the accounts of early settlers, suggests that the Yowie has been a part of the Australian landscape for centuries. Footprint evidence, analyzed by experts like Dr. Meldrum, adds a layer of credibility, as does the thermal and video footage captured in the last few decades. While mainstream science has yet to officially recognize the Yowie as a legitimate species, the sheer volume of eyewitness reports and physical evidence cannot be ignored. Future research, including the use of advanced DNA analysis and long-term surveillance in Yowie hotspots, may ultimately provide the proof needed to confirm that a large bipedal primate roams the remote regions of Australia. Until then, the Yowie remains one of the world's most fascinating and elusive cryptids. Well, I don't know about you, but I certainly find it difficult to dismiss every one of these stories, personal testimonies, and pieces of visual evidence as lies or misidentifications. The question really isn't whether Yowie exists or not. It's pretty clear that it does. The real question is, what is Yowie? Let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments below, and thank you for watching. If you want to show me extra support, I'll leave a link to my Buy Me a Coffee page in the description, and I'll see you in the next video.